A surprising number of people starting EVE Online commence that journey by asking if they really need to join an in-game corporation, and perhaps an even more astonishing number of people don't bother to ask at all and just assume the answer is no. It becomes a lot less unexplained when you look around at the current ecosystem, both in MMOs and social networking as a whole. Long gone are the days where EVE's chat windows were buzzing with activity, and that's not to say that those chat windows weren't right there waiting for you, but it's just not the done thing. Personally, I'm in the Initiative Alliance. On paper, at the time of writing, we're the third biggest alliance in the game, and yet our in-game alliance chat channel can easily see less than a few dozen messages a day, most of which are unanswered market offers or people trying to rejoin a fleet after getting disconnected from the game. Corp chats can be more active, sure, and my corporation's in-game chat does occasionally see flurries of activity even now, but the majority of corporation or alliance chat these days happens on a third-party platform like Discord, Mumble, TeamSpeak, or Jabber. This has had some really interesting effects on the game, many positive for sure, but many negative and truly unexpected. The first and most obvious of which is that you can be incredibly active in an in-game community without being in the game. World of Warcraft has always been historically quite famous for this phenomenon of just standing around in an in-game space, absorbing the atmosphere while socializing with friends. EVE is no different really, except that if you're just in-game to socialize and nothing else, there's a really good chance you'll be sat docked in station. I like to think this is one of the eventual goals for the walking in stations feature that CCP tried and failed in the past, because it would have been really nice to experience some form of presence while not actively in space. EVE already has massive benefits from its single shard persistent qualities, and yet stations feel like such liminal spaces lacking any real character or atmosphere. This prevalence of third-party platforms for communication has made many MMORPGs start to feel more like a single-player experience. EVE being a sandbox PvP-focused game is slightly more shielded from this compared to the PvE theme park MMOs, but it's because of this that new players aren't necessarily immediately drawn to the prospect of joining a corporation. You'll find no shortage of posts asking this exact question, so I'm hoping that eventually this video pops up in the results for the next wave of EVE players when they ask that question, so that I can convince you why you absolutely should join a corporation. Learning the game. It might sound really ironic me saying this, but no number of YouTube videos or blog posts are going to get you such personalized and experienced information as that which can be gleaned from a community that's actually willing to help new bros. In my corp, for example, we have a help channel designed as a kind of no such thing as a stupid question spot. What's actually most interesting is how often there are people with a lot of hours in the game still asking something that might seem simple to you. It's really testament to how deep and complex EVE is, since you can go years and years without engaging with an entire half of the game's content, depending on where you've lived and the activities you've tried. It's also a really good way to avoid slipping into bad habits. There are some leaps of logic that might seem self-evident to a new player, often because of perceived similarities to mechanics in another game, that don't actually work at all how someone would expect. For example, confusing the behavior of autopilot in EVE with that of auto-run in another game, where one is basically an input replication of a player pressing the W key. Autopilot in EVE has distinctly different behavior to that of a real player and impacts the benefits and drawbacks of using it. It's important to keep in mind though that EVE is not always a game with an absolute answer. It's quite funny seeing people on Reddit or the EVE forums talk about how EVE Online is a solved game. While I understand the principle, you can ask the most basic meta questions and come up with completely different answers depending on who's around to hear you. For that reason, a corp is significantly more beneficial than using public channels like Rookie Help. God bless some of the ISDs and experienced players willing to help new bros in Rookie Help, but there's also some absolute idiots in there who'll actively encourage you down some of the most stupid paths, usually out of ignorance, but also occasionally out of malice. Having a single community with similar values and interests to you can help ensure you're getting consistent and well-intended advice. Community, or tribalism. There's something uniquely enjoyable about working with a group of like-minded people, all pulling in the same direction, or at least vaguely aligned in similar values and beliefs. The important thing is to be able to differentiate between that which is community and that which is just tribalism. They might seem similar at first, but if you find yourself in a group convinced that the rest of the game needs to be purged or that nobody else is playing the game right, you might have found yourself in an EVE cult, honestly more likely than you'd think. Instead, you're probably better off finding a group of people who all prefer a certain way of playing the game, with that being your preferred way too. You might be wondering, how will I know what's the way I prefer to play? And that's a fair question. As much as possible, it's best you can ask a lot of questions during the recruitment phase of joining a corporation, so that you can get a good feel of whether or not it's the place for you. We'll talk a little bit about that process later in the video. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind about the attitude of a corporation you're joining is that if they ostracize and ridicule anyone who plays the game differently to them, then the second you feel like a change of pace or would like to play the game a bit differently yourself, you will become the ostracized and ridiculed. It does not lock you out of solo play. The idea that corporations completely limit your playstyle is something that's annoyed me for a very long time. By and large, there's absolutely nothing about being in a corporation that prevents you from engaging in content that the rest of the corp doesn't get involved in. Sure, if your goal was to do different things with a community, then a different corp might be the way to go, but if you're worried that being in a corp is going to stop you from playing the game solo, don't be. Different corporations will of course expect different levels of involvement, but even those with the most hand-holding styles of gameplay will not only allow, but usually expect you to be able to act independently. You may get together every other day in a big fleet or hang out in comms every evening talking shop, but if you just want to go and do your own thing, nobody is going to stop you. You honestly don't even really need to be active in that corporation's primary area of space, as long as you're an otherwise good fit and good member of that corp's community. For example, I remember back when I was doing faction warfare pretty heavily, just after the Uprising expansion. There was a member of that community who outside of his faction warfare playtime was a wormhole nomad. It was always quite funny, because he'd hear about an upcoming fleet and unlike most people who just logged on in a nearby militia NPC station, he had to start scanning down his chain or rage rolling to get access to the war zone. He never let what he was doing in his own time prevent him from getting involved in some completely different group gameplay. What might surprise new people starting out in EVE and considering whether or not they should join a corp is that the bigger the corp, the more of this freedom you're likely to have. Beyond a certain point, corporations start to hit that concept of the Dunbar number. Essentially, it's too big of a community for everyone to know everyone. As such, people form into smaller groups of interest, and you're more likely to be able to get involved in something completely different to the corporation's main activities, and still find a couple of people who can guide and advise you on getting started. It is a reversible decision. I've spoken to some serial solo players whose biggest trepidation about joining a corporation is getting rug pulled and losing everything they worked for. It's a totally valid concern, but the issue there lies more in your risk management rather than the actual likelihood of a corp doing that. It happens. Pandemic Horde members know better than anyone right now how it feels to see everything you worked for disappear overnight at no fault of your own. But you don't need to move everything you own across the galaxy all at once. This game attracts completionists and hoarders. It doesn't take much of an examination of the community to see that, so if you sit down and really work out what assets you need to take with you for say 2 weeks trying out a new corp, you'd realize it's probably going to come to less than one jump freighter's worth, and therefore probably not too expensive to have shipped or just fly to your new home yourself. If and only if you decide that corporation is a good fit for you and you feel comfortable with the attitude of the community and its leadership, you can have the rest of your assets moved over anytime you like. I will add the slight caveat though, you should remember all things are temporary. In EVE at least, I'm not going to get too philosophical about real life, but if you never want to put your assets at risk, you will never experience the game. So there's nothing wrong with minimizing risk, but there is always a chance the worst could happen, and that's just something you have to live with. The tax break. The very simple and most obvious reason that jumps out to new bros is that being in a corp offers a tax break compared to being in the NPC corp. I spoke in my previous video on EVE Online myths about how specifically tax break focused corporations are usually a bit of a scam, so keep that in mind. But you'll be hard pressed to find many corporations that actually charge more in tax than the NPC corp, so it's not like low tax needs to be the focus of your search. It's true of course that you can achieve this tax break and in fact have no tax at all by founding your own corp. You meet a lot of people in EVE's early game who've elected to do this rather than join an existing one, but I really recommend against this. Once you start your own little personal corp, you'll get comfy and possessive of it, and you'll just become even less likely to ever join another corp and experience the vast majority of the game's experiences which lie in the community, rather than the mechanics and the day-to-day gameplay. Diversity of opinions and activities. EVE has many echo chambers unique to each community with the game, and all extremely sure that they hold the only valid opinion. While I don't have any data to back this up at all, anecdotally I noticed that these most often come from people who either stay away from corporations and in-game communities entirely, or stick to a very small and stagnant group. Joining a corporation that has people with a variety of playtimes, origin stories, specializations, all helps you gain a broader understanding of the game and the people that inhabit it. This is perhaps less necessary if you've already been around the game a lot and want to settle with a smaller community with an extremely narrow scope of gameplay, but keep in mind that if you join a more broad and varied corporation, you yourself can pass on those experiences you've had to the next wave of EVE players. Building a narrative. When people ask me about EVE Online, it's very rare that I explain this MMO through its gameplay and mechanics. Instead, the focus is on its stories. This seems to be the case for most people too. I'm willing to bet your first exposure to EVE was maybe a friend telling you about some crazy sequence of events, or one of the many news articles about the big battles, or a YouTube video about the history of a group. These stories aren't sealed, and they're still being written, and one of the most fun things you can do in EVE is be part of writing the next ones. By getting involved with a corporation or alliance, you can help shape a whole new generation of stories filled with conflict, deception, and espionage, or at least those are the things people remember rather than the fleet grind. It's a common misconception too that you have to be some kind of Machiavellian political figure to have an impact in the wider EVE lore, but often the biggest wars start with a small spark, and everyone from the Alliance Executor to the new bro with 2 days in Corp can share in the story that unfolds. There's a reason EVE historically used the idea of "I was there" in their marketing. Knowing you are part of something that will be talked about for years gives a satisfaction very rarely replicated in other games. Try not to judge your first try. Another one of the really common comments I see from serial solo players is that of a bad experience in a corporation previously that's put them off the idea of joining a corporation altogether. It's important to remember that in-game communities vary immensely, and if you come away from one with a bad experience, that shouldn't put you off the idea completely. Admittedly, there are some things that are quite consistent across the board, which you will need to be able to stomach. Some form of activity requirement and giving your API key to an HR platform like Seat or Alliance Auth are very common requirements. I've mentioned in a previous video why this shouldn't put off as many people as it does, but that's a whole other can of worms. The most common poor experience I see is when people had a Corp leader that scammed its membership or in some way took advantage of the rest of the Corp. It absolutely happens that there are CEOs or directors using their position to squeeze the people below them, but it is a very small minority of Corps. Unfortunately, they just happen to be a lot of people's first experience of being in a corporation because those people lack the experience to spot the red flags of this kind of thing early on. Do not rush into the first Corp that says yes. Take your time researching corporations and use multiple sources. The most likely first place you'll look up corporations is the in-game corporation recruitment pages. These are pretty good, and there are lots of filters to help identify corps that will best fit your playstyle. It's a good idea, however, to also check out the r/EveJobs subreddit, the EVE recruitment forums, as well as just generally Google searching the corporation you're interested in joining. Any corp that's existed for more than a year or two will probably see results of previous recruitment ads or members of that corp posting in various third-party EVE communities. Or you might find other people talking about those corps. As always, take posts from the EVE community with a pinch of salt, but a quick Google search can save you from a lot of trouble if you don't work out a group has a reputation until after you've moved in. If a corp seems willing to accept you, but you're not quite sure, then there's nothing wrong with declining the invitation or deciding to look someplace else. It's not like a job interview in 2025, there are plenty of places happy to have you. It's important, however, not to burn bridges on the way out. The EVE community isn't tiny, but the leadership and recruitment teams of these corporations are a tiny percentage of the game's overall player base, and they talk. If you're rude or obnoxious to one corp, don't be surprised if word gets around. It's not uncommon for alliances to keep logs about applicants that other corporations can query months or even years into the future. Even outside of alliances, I personally get EVE mails all the time from other corporations asking me about people that were previously in my corp, interested to hear why they left or why they were removed. Nothing is as valuable in EVE as your reputation, so don't sully it on a whim because you decide a corporation isn't for you. Do not start a corporation without being in one first. This is good advice for almost any MMO, but it's a classic problem people fall into if they have a certain independent personality type and would rather lead than follow. I can understand that, but rest assured that you will struggle immensely with leading a group in EVE if you haven't had the experience of being part of a corporation. Not only is there just a litany of experience ready to be gained, but some parts of Alliance and Corporation activity have become ubiquitous, unsurprisingly for a game over 20 years in age. There's nothing at all wrong with doing things in a fresh new way, but if you don't understand some of the staples like SRP, buyback programs, bookmark folders, blueprint libraries, access lists, intel channels, the list goes on, then you will find yourself stumbling trying to reinvent the wheel over and over. As an aside too, the same applies with in-corp roles often as well. I'm very lucky in my corporation to have a lot of people offering to help all the time, and that's amazing, and I'm sure people in corporation leadership across the game appreciate that. But often, the best way you can help a corporation is to play the game the way you want to play it, engage with the rest of the Corp's community, and generally have fun. Nothing benefits a corporation more than having a good core of active and enthusiastic players. For new bros, do you have any other questions about joining a corp? Be sure to ask in the comments, and for more experienced players, maybe drop something in the comments with your thoughts about corporations in EVE 2. I read every comment for better or for worse, so I'll try and reply and help out myself too, but for now, I'll see you in the next video. If you want to help support the channel, consider buying your next EVE Online pack, subscription, or Plex from marqueedragon.com using the link in the video description. Use coupon code BILL at checkout for 3% off your order. I've also got YouTube membership enabled now. I've only recently become eligible for it, but the plan is to include some member-only videos and probably a Discord server or something like that. The only perk for subscribing right now is a badge on YouTube, but it's 99 cents if you'd prefer that way of supporting the channel.